Good morning, Vuyo. Welcome
Hey, Caroline.
again to the Jem offices. I want to start this discussion by hearing more about you. You've got one of the most impressive corporate CVs in this country, I think, across brands like Standard Bank and Old Mutual and Vodacom. But how on earth did you end up in venture capital?
Firstly, thanks for having me here, Caroline. Thanks. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you about the amazing work you guys do and how Next 176 and Old Mutual are part of that. So for me, kind of end up in venture capital has been I'm not even sure that I am in, by the way, but it's kind of been a very, very progressive journey, and starting off my career in kind of tech as a young engineer, software development. So moving from building tech for your company that you're working in, whether it was at CSR those days, getting into Vodacom, getting into Standard Bank, building digital businesses for them, building their first USSD banking app, 2008, I'd imagine, backing teams that founded the likes of SnapScan and the guys that worked on the Shift of this world. And then having the opportunity to also lead a conversation with Old Mutual CEO around growth for the Old Mutual Group, saying actually perhaps there are opportunities for us to partner, build and invest in the venture space. And that's kind of how that journey has ended up kind of being in venture capital.
And tell us a little bit more about your mission at Next 176.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. I think the fundamental origin is exactly as I said earlier. It was Old Mutual 176 years later from when they were started, 2021 or so. The CEO then was saying, well, we've got a really, really great business. It's existed for 176 years. We can see growth in our core businesses, but we don't think we've got enough kind of rods in different fires adjacent to our business that could fundamentally help us think about the next 176 years for Old Mutual, and hence the name. And so we've kind of said, hey, maybe there's opportunities for us to really think about key ecosystems that fundamentally drive consumer engagement. People are worried about their health, they're worried about their education and their kids' education, but they're also worried about getting jobs and how they manage the jobs that they're in. They're not all employed by a big Old Mutual or Standard Bank as they used to, many moons back. There's a lot of people kind of getting into gig work and the works. And when they do that, we don't have the financial services that were built for those. We haven't done enough financial services to embed it in health, in education. So the whole idea was, let's think about the next 176 years for Old Mutual, but let's also be very, very, very confined in terms of where we think about it. Let's think about it in these 5 or 6 ecosystems so that you kind of don't end up, orbiting out of space completely.
Yes.
And so the ecosystems that we chose coincidentally have massive impact.
I mean, that's exciting, and I think that's how our paths have crossed. So just to pick up on that theme of impact, it kind of echoes my story and how I came to be an entrepreneur, which was not the plan, actually, out the gates. I took a bit of a break to do some studying in my kind of early 30s a few years ago, and I really, when I went back into the job market after I graduated, I had this idea of a sort of a Venn diagram of technology, because that's what's happening in the world. Startup, a new business, somewhere where I could be my own boss. But the third bit was impact, and that's kind of, I think, where the paths of Jem and Next 176 cross, is the sense that business can be a force for good. So I want to move on to that next and talk about technology specifically, because technology and venture capital are generally synonymous because of the scalability and the potential impact, but the financial potential of technology. So tell me a little bit about the impact that you hope to make as part of Next 176. Because 176 years is a very long term for a venture capital firm.
Listen, I think the power of technology, and how it has created completely new industries, obliterated some, but how it's changed business models fundamentally, how it's the ability to scale, the ability to kind of take something from here and be able to kind of do it globally, in a short space of time. I think technology for me is a core to that. And so our entire thesis is driven by businesses that are going to create massive impact, impacting 1 billion lives. And you're not going to do that, kind of country by country, person by person on the ground. Tech gives you the ability to kind of pick an idea, get it to work, pick a business model, and be able to scale it. So that's what fascinates us about it is the ability to kind of just fundamentally transform business models, and also the opportunity to scale. So that's that from our perspective, Caroline.
Yeah, I mean it's a very worthy mission, I think, and I think one of the things that not everybody in business understands is that government and business aren't necessarily they're not necessarily mutually exclusive in terms of the impact that they can have on society. And it was so interesting, the discussions I've had this week with HR leaders in the country, where you potentially have talent, young people in your organization that haven't been able to afford education or things like that. And the business is now the vehicle for that training and education and upliftment, way more so than a community or government is able to do in that case. Yeah. And I think that's where technology comes in particularly.
Absolutely. I think fundamentally, even when people think about investing, they think about financial investing at arm's length to impact investing. So I'm an impact fund, I'm an impact investor, or I'm a financial orientated PE VC firm. I think what we've learned is that the two are not mutually exclusive. Your ability to kind of think about your own organization, it's creating massive impact. But actually, our own investment thesis on it was not only the impact, was actually it can create an absolutely amazing financial vehicle. Of course, it impacts hundreds and thousands of lives, which is where we want it to be, millions, but it's really not mutually exclusive. So we do agree. We do agree with that.
Definitely. Vuyo, one of the things that frustrates me often about the technological world is that we're so focused in our narratives, in our discussions, in our learning on the most leading edge technology, where some of the more simple technologies haven't actually filtered down to the majority. And in my view, technology is one of the only solutions that we have for a sort of more equal world and general upliftment, things like education, things like financial services access. So what do you think about trying to get technology and build technologies in a sustainable way for the sort of 80%?
I think I do agree with you, firstly. I think most of us get fascinated by the bleeding and the leading edge tech. I kind of think about the revolutions we're getting into, and there's always things to learn and kind of contrast. I was doing probably third, fourth, final year, when we were studying about 3G, at varsity, and I barely had a cell phone. No one really cares today about the internet. No one cares about where your packets go. In the mid-90s, when I was studying, that was a big deal. I was studying engineering, it was a big deal, which protocol is going to be. Is it TCP, UDP? What does the routing look like? Right now, no one cares about it. You pick up your device and you do what you want to do, and that's it.
Yeah.
So there is a time when there's quite a lot of chatter about which one of these is going to dominate and win. But what we're starting to see is that the time of that chatter around the core horizontal technologies is getting squashed and squashed and squashed. And we're starting to see quite a lot of the vertical applications that you and me use. Not worried about the underlying horizontal tech, which is super, super important. Initially, that's where all the money goes, is the underlying infrastructure, which is required, of course. And then that's where you find the technological battles. But I think over time, it's that kind of, starting to grow into the vertical applications, and then no one, you don't care which one of these has won. I just want to kind of find the applications that are going to be useful. So that's my sense. That's my sense, Caroline.
Yeah, it is such an interesting one for us because so in our business, our entire interface is actually on WhatsApp, and this is a very new use case for WhatsApp, I think. But it's about, for us, it started with, if you're building an HR technology, you need to start with the employee, and it would really surprise you how little of HR technology is actually built with the employee in mind. I mean, I've got some extreme stories, but I know several companies who employ more than 10,000 people that sit at a printer and print out 10,000 pay slips every month, separate them into branches, put them in courier bags at great cost, by the way, and then send them out to employees. Now, you can imagine when that pay slip gets to the employee, and this is it's not only a legal requirement to deliver a pay slip, but it's a necessity, it's a piece of dignity and independence for that person. And yet, we haven't figured out how to get that off it's one of those statements where you say, we can put a man on the moon, but we can't get somebody their pay slip in a digital fashion.
Got you.
So for me, that's one of the frustrations, but also one of the inspirations behind our business. And then you get onto, more worrying stories where there's organizations who actually force their employees to take all of their annual leave in one block. And we've sat with many of these employers and sort of sought to understand why they do that. So the employee can't just take a day off for a child's school play, or if they need to go and get a procedure done or something like that. They have to take it all in one block annually. And we talked to the employees, and it was purely logistical. It was purely because it's too difficult to manage employees who are on shift work going on leave when they wanted to. And that is something that blows my mind, but also inspires me about how much more work there is to do with technology. And as you say, on that horizontal layer, to make sure that the benefits of technology accrue equally across our societies.
My word. I mean, one of the things to add to what you're saying, Caroline, we've always fundamentally believed that there's great entrepreneurs, Caroline, Simon, who started and co-founders in Jem, who in the ecosystems we've spoken about are going to be amazing. There is no way we're going to know those, but at Jem, the leadership at Jem, they've proven to us that actually there's something here, there's an opportunity here, and it's worth investing in. We've always also believed that the real power and our reason for kind of wanting to play in these ecosystems is understanding the fundamental shift that financial services gives to societies, to individuals, communities and societies, countries, and the world. So think about exactly the examples that you talk about. We believe that when you have the access that Jem HR gives, people have dignity because they now have the payslip. But that payslip is able to help them to kind of go and get a loan at a reputable institution, to buy a home, get a loan at a reputable institution to take their kids to the schools that they want to go to, And those, we believe, is the real power of a partnership of a Jem HR and Next 176 Old Mutual, is that by the simple thing that you talk about, the opportunity that it gives, to that employee, to that community, to that society, to that country, and to the world is absolutely phenomenal. And that's really why we're so excited about the partnership we've had with yourselves.
I think we're probably more excited, Vuyo, about it. So let's go into that. Let's start talking a little bit about employee benefits, because again, our business journey has been organic in the sense that as we've learned more about the sector of the deskless workers. Some people might use it, frontline workers. We certainly don't like the term blue collar, but we call people deskless workers. They don't sit behind a desk. It's not easy for them to do something simple like log into an employee self-service platform or get training. and to use digital tools. So one of the things that is impressive about Old Mutual is this employee benefits offering, one of the largest employee benefits providers in the country. My question is, deskless workers are often the last to be reached. There are a lot of challenges around reaching them. What's your take on that, offering benefits to the person who guards the building, or the person who cleans the building, or the person who serves the coffee, at the coffee shop?
Listen, if you think about it, Caroline, we have business models that have existed for decades. The business we have in Old Mutual called Employee Benefits has been in existence for decades. We love it. It's one of the best in the country. Market share wise, really top class, a really amazing business. But when you look at the market and you think about the size of that market in the way that we deliver that service today, it's probably not reaching more than 5 million people. You've asked yourself the question, then where's everyone else? Where is everyone else? And I think it's really kind of these business models that were built for actually an Anglo-American employs 200,000 people. Let's build a business that's going to go to an Anglo-American to still get to the employee, by the way, but our go-to-market was built for an Anglo. It was built for an Eskom. It was built for a Standard Bank. It was built for these massive organizations that actually employ tens and hundreds of thousands of people. The world we're living in now, we're realizing that actually not everyone is employed by Anglo. Yeah? So who's employing everyone else? Our business models today, we're not built for that. And that's really the reason why we actually set up Next 176, because we understand that. We understand that actually the current business models were built for a particular purpose, and to be able to change them internally is difficult. So we have to find partners and work with other organizations that are already doing that. I think about it, if you go back in time and you think about the evolution of cellular in the country, when the MTNs and the Vodacom started, the market that they had identified was a fraction of what it is. Because it was premised on an expensive device that they'd had to fund. And so for that to happen, you had to have someone who's employed, who has a contract. You had to take a contract, so they would require pay slips and all of those things. What prepaid did blew open such an industry that we have today.
Yes.
It changed it fundamentally to say, well, should it really be such an expensive device? Do you really need to be employed and have a pay slip for you to be able to do this? Why don't you just pay as you go? Correct? And so the businesses that I'm excited about, Jem as an example, your own business it's taking that entire world that was built and designed for an Anglo with 200, 300,000 employees and say, actually, there's a couple of smaller Anglos still with deskless kind of distributed employees, but that are not employing hundreds of thousands. We'd love for you to be able to go to an employer that has hundreds of thousands, but we think there's a lot of other employers that are employing 100, 200, 300, 400 that existing incumbents do not have business models to serve.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating insight, and it's kind of the opportunity we're seeing, and it's a massive opportunity for us. But it goes back to the earlier point that we were talking about, which is that business can be a force for good just in the product that it produces, but also in the lives of its employees.
Absolutely.
And there's so much opportunity in terms of financial education, financial services and benefits that are only possible through an employer because of that contractual relationship between the employer and employee, and of course because of the scale of it.
Yeah.
But I've got a fun story for you. In my past life, I used to design benefits programs and rewards programs for employees. And one employer came to us. They were a very large retailer in South Africa. And they used to have something that they called the budget bonus in the store. So if the store reached its target budget for the month, each employee would get an extra 500 Rand. And these were employees back then on about 5,000 Rand a month. So it's not an insignificant bonus. They kept saying to us, we're spending this, and this amounts to millions and millions in their payroll every single month. And they said, it's not working. It doesn't seem to drive the right performance. We came in, we did a bit of investigation, we asked some questions, came up with the solution. What was the solution? SMS people and tell them about the benefit that they were getting. They had no idea why they were getting this 500 Rand occasionally on their payslip. They had no clue. And the results after that, so what we designed was just an SMS system. It would say at the beginning of the month, this is your budget for the store, and this is what you're going to get if you meet budget. A week into the month, we would say another SMS message saying, okay, you're on track, you're at 25% of budget, keep going. And then we were halfway through, we'd say, okay, you're off track, you guys need to sell more goods. And that was the key. And that for me was one of the most powerful lessons I've ever learned, which is that you have to tell people that they've got a benefit. You have to tell people about an incentive. And this is, to me, one of the most powerful things that we can do as employers, as business owners, is make sure people understand. You're getting this benefit, this is cheaper, this is a good decision, this is a good loan, this is a bad loan, this is... And this is, for me, why WhatsApp makes so much sense for us, which is, how do you get in contact with your employees? And Anglo may have the resources to do that. But as you say, these 300, 400, 500 person businesses who have employees distributed all over the country, how are they going to make sure that the employees are aware of the benefits and are aware of what's going on in the organization? And that doesn't only talk to benefits, it talks to how do they have the information they need to do their jobs? You know, a restaurant chain that runs out of a key ingredient, supply chain shortages happen. Yes. Their frontline employees need to know that in order to do their job well, communicate that to customers. Yes. And that communication gap is one of the most obvious pieces of low-hanging fruit, I think, to get right. Because people need to be empowered. They care about their jobs. We did this amazing Deskless Pulse study, and you found that well over 85% of people actually find a lot of meaning in their jobs. They enjoy their work. And you walk past a security guard perhaps every morning dismissively. That person sees the value that they bring to the people in that building, and they care about their jobs. And so there's this opportunity for employers to communicate properly, to empower those people to do their jobs properly, and also to make sure they know about all of the benefits that are available through their employer. So I think actually the biggest missing piece is the communication. I got you. And
I mean, there's so many stories that you hear about these, Caroline. Thanks for raising that. You know, that same gentleman who's security guard in the company, the day he passes away, no one in the family knows the affairs. No one in the family knows the financial affairs. So what do you see? You see the wife, the sister of, you know, his sisters, 2 or 3, and they all going to the employer to queue and to figure out, so he is late. What happens next? Because no one knew. And those are the real stories that we have in our society. And those are the opportunities that organizations like yourselves are fundamentally giving our societies an opportunity to be able to actually participate. It's not just about the payslip, it's access to financial services and inclusion, which is fundamental, for the society that we're in to prosper. And that's really the power of what we love. And that's why we love your organization, because it gives the power to give that gentleman, that security guard, dignity. I love that word you used, participate, because I think that is so, you know, sometimes it's, when I talk to employers, I feel like there's a sense of paternalism around, we will make decisions on behalf of our employees. And this issue of dignity and participation this is an adult that should have self-determination over how they do their job, over how they conduct themselves, over how they uplift themselves in their job. And I think in many businesses, there needs to be a big mind shift around, okay, once we've given access, once you've communicated effectively, there's incredible potential sitting on your factory floor. If only we would take a less paternalistic view and not make decisions for people, but empower people to make their own good decisions. And a key part of that, once you've gotten kind of the access and the communication, is education. is, okay, so this is what you get at the end of the month.
Yeah.
What's a split of how much of these services your core needs?
Yeah.
What's a split of this is things that, you can do without? And what's a split of this is things that you're saving for the future. You're protecting and you're saving for the future. Financial services tells you that actually the first thing that you need to do when you start a job is to actually start thinking about retirement from when you start. But when you're 40 or 50, it's too late. But if someone hasn't been told that, they don't understand that, they don't understand the impact of compounding from when they get the first job.
Yes.
The time they're in their 30s, you've lost so much. And the compounding effect, you don't have anymore. You can never get it. And those are some of the things that I think your organization, the work that you do, has impact on. That's the opportunity we see and we love.
So now that you've said that, I can't not talk about the two-pot system and the...
Yes.
I mean, for me, it was just such an interesting thing in the media at the time when it was all about to be turned on, I guess. We actually just reached out to a bunch of employers and said, what are you guys doing? They all have provident funds. They need to communicate about the two-pot system. And we reached out to a bunch of employers and said, we did actually a quick survey. The survey was, I'm ready, we've got our communications. We're sort of ready, we've got some things, but we're not sure, and I'm not ready at all. And it was wild how many of these businesses were not ready at all. And their employees hadn't received any communication from their provident funds around how to responsibly respond to the two-pot system. And for me, I mean, I talk often about security guards because it's one of our main client bases, but of course, every office building I've ever worked in has security guards. And so when it was happening, I used to stop and talk to the security guard at the front of that building. Her name was Pumla. And I would check with her every day, have you received the two-pot communication from your Provident Fund? And eventually she had. And she asked me a couple of questions about it. And one day she just said, I was going to withdraw, but I realized now that I'm going to pay a bunch of tax and I'm not going to withdraw. Simple knowledge that she was lacking. And so... yeah, I mean, I think the communication piece, again, I'll come back to, is so critical. And I'm going to ask a controversial question now. There's a certain complicitness of financial institutions because it is so hard to reach this particular segment of population, the mass market, you might call it, that often the way that we sell financial services to them is over the phone and incrementally. Hey, do you want this policy? Do you want this account? Do you want that? Never looking at the holistic, the whole person, right? And that often means that a person has what I would call a Frankenstein of financial products. And so we talk about access, but there's another problem here, which is overinsured and extreme access to financial services. What are some of the issues you see around this? What are some of the solutions?
Yeah. Listen, I think the power of technology in this world, you cannot underestimate. I think access is fundamental. Access is fundamental. Think about Pumla that you spoke about. Think about the knowledge that an advisor to Pumla has to have. Firstly, to just think about all the breadth and the depth of, kind of going from a simple savings product, a retirement product, and different types of insurances. Think about your banking, your lending. It's difficult to scale.
Yeah.
It's difficult to scale with a face-to-face advisor, it's really difficult to scale. It's difficult and expensive to scale. Do financial services organizations try? Absolutely.
Yes.
If you think about even an Old Mutual and you think about how many advisors they have who talk to Pumla every day, who go to and actually go to the websites and all those things, it's crazy. One of the segments will have 5,000-10,000 advisors. So the ability to kind of think about tech and think about the opportunity to turn that business model around is think about the world we're starting to get into, but think about the world and the opportunity that a Pumla now has when she's got WhatsApp and she's got AI on that WhatsApp. Think about the questions that she's going to be asking the financial advisor. If that financial advisor is not AI as well, it's a problem. And so when you think about these horizontal technologies, I was at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, this is 2015 or 16, when the acquisition of WhatsApp, Jan was standing there, kind of, the acquisition of WhatsApp had just been announced, And you look at what WhatsApp has kind of done right now, 10 years later, it's kind of, it's a table stake. It's a table stake. Internet was that. WhatsApp has been like that. It's a table stake. That's a horizontal tech.
Yeah.
And it's given businesses like yourselves the ability to be able to say, actually, I don't have to figure out how to communicate. There's a platform that's there.
Yes.
I think the next wave that we are facing right now is actually the intelligence that we can give onto that with WhatsApp, on top of WhatsApp, with AI. That actually Jem has the opportunity to actually provide the intelligence that no single advisor can never give. Because each advisor is going to understand this world very, very, very well. The complexity of understanding life insurance, and it's regulated for all the right reasons. And so think about the person who's selling a life insurance product, who's also selling a credit product. All of them are regulated. The requirements for all of those, it's a difficult task. And that's the opportunity I see with businesses like yourselves. That's the opportunity that I see with technology. It's not from the lack of trying.
Yeah.
It is not from the lack of trying. The investments that FSs give into kind of financial education programs, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Not because it's regulated, because everyone understands that we need to do it.
Yes.
But our ability to scale that is limited by the fact that we haven't kind of made as much progress on adopting these technologies to the extent that we should. Does everyone have a website? Does everyone have an... Of course. But there's so much more still to be done.
Well, you touched on something that I think is very exciting. We've talked a lot about communication, information, and access. And now we've got the ability for AI to do what we couldn't before, which is look at the whole person when we are, for lack of a better word, prescribing financial products to somebody. What is this person's family situation? What is their financial situation? What are their debt levels? And one of the things that, again, is an interesting observation that I've made across businesses is we look at a workforce and we tend to see it as homogenous. Everyone's earning more or less the same thing. Everyone has more or less the same costs. We potentially, us in our nice offices tend to look at people and say they're in debt because they haven't budgeted properly. But every time we talk to one of these people or conduct a survey, you realize the individual stories in there. We did a survey recently and we asked people as an open question, what is your biggest financial challenge at the moment? And these manufacturing workers that work for a great company, but of course their earnings aren't particularly high. And one person said, I'm building a house and the costs ran over a little bit. So I'm needing some extra financial help at the moment. Which is, I think we can all understand if we do a building project at our house, it's going over budget. The second person's sister had passed away and she was now taking care of her sister's child. A huge financial shock initially, and also just a long-term financial addition. And the other person has a special needs child that needs tutoring. And these are everyday human problems that need different solutions. They need different financial plans. And I'm excited about AI not making everybody the same, but seeing the individual in the situation and what the individual challenges are. What are some of the other opportunities you're seeing for AI as a technology for good as well?
Sure. I guess it's probably worth going back a bit, Caroline. I was doing third year of an electronic engineering degree, and we were studying mid-90s, so yeah, you can guess my age. Artificial intelligence was one of the core modules. And I remember, things around text recognition, image recognition, speech recognition, processing, and we had this that we had to do on here is a photo of hundreds of people at the beach. There's one particular boy who's wearing a red track pant. Can you design a software program to be able to pick up that boy? Of course, you're now working with kind of second generation, third generation programming languages. You confined to the chip and the processing. And you take 10, 20 years, 30 years later, those problem statements haven't changed. But what technology is able to do now, the power of processing, the power of cloud, all the investments that are going to chip technology are making that super, super easy and quick to be able to do. So whenever I think about AI, I think about it in probably three levels. Level one is AI, which is 95% of the applications we're going to get, is AI is doing what you and me can do, but it's going to take me a long time to do it. I can't do it at night. It's going to take me a long time to do. Am I able to do it? Absolutely, with a lot of time and effort, but that doesn't scale well, because Vuyo has to do it, Caroline has to do it for this one, and Caroline, you can only do it, you've got only so many hours in the day. 95% of what we're going to be using AI for is exactly that. I think there's an extra 5% or even less that is going to be used. AI is going to impact kind of really specialized applications. Think about reading mammograms. You've got to be a specialized doctor to be able to do that. Only 1% of the entire world's population is ever going to be able to do that. AI is going to be able to do it just like that. And we're seeing applications that do that right now. I think the fundamentally fascinating part for me is the 0.1%, which is actually AI doing things that you and me can never do. So one application, one company that we're talking to now is actually reading your blood pressure from your phone or on your screen or your laptop. You look for 30 seconds, you look at the screen for 30 seconds, and boom, there's your pulse, there's your blood pressure, and that's it. You and me can never be able to do that. But AI is able to do that and is progressively going to be even doing it better with the more training, it's going to be even better and all those things. So going back to the question that we're talking about around Phumla, again. Phumla's needs are complex. Phumla's needs are really complex. I agree with you. She's not, I'm going to digress for a second. I worked at Standard Bank. I was in channels distribution, and my colleague used to run physical channels, the branches, and there was a joke that when you walk inside a branch, a consultant, as you're walking in, they're looking at their scorecard to see how, where they are low. Is it current accounts, is it savings products? Regardless of what you're coming to for, you're going to walk out with a current account. Because I'm low on current accounts. But those are some of the things that are really, really fundamental to say, actually, of course, there's issues around incentives. We cannot dismiss that. But fundamentally, to actually know the complexity of Phumla's needs is difficult. You sit with your financial advisor and you go, it's not one session.
No.
They don't get it in one session. You have to sit there, you have to bring your entire 3 months, 6 months bank statement, you've got to look at everything else, and then you have to have a personal conversation about preferences. But that's a very specialized financial advisor who's able to talk to you about that. Phumla does not have access to that. And that's the opportunity that AI is going to give us. So because maybe your assets and my assets are much bigger than Phumla's, so Phumla is not worthy of that, that's wrong. And that's what AI is going to be able to deliver for us. And if we're not watching the space, Phumla is working with AI already. And it's the rest of the incumbents who need to be thinking about how much AI they have. Because the client that you're talking to is much smarter than the financial advisor that you've trained on a single product line. So that's really what excites me about this world. Remember at the beginning we said technology has this massive opportunity to actually transform and fundamentally change business models. And in that process, some organizations will flourish and some will disappear.
I mean, it's a daunting and exciting future at the same time, but I share your excitement about the ability for us to extend that kind of service that only the wealthiest would get down to absolutely everybody in society because of just the processing power now of AI and information and our ability to customize. And I love what you said about Pumla or anybody's needs being complex, because everybody does have a different situation. And too often, I think we generalize about people. Vuyo, I think one of the things that we have in common is, if I may say, is a lot of optimism about this country, about this continent. Tell me sort of a parting word on what you see for the future, or what you hope for the future, as somebody who's trying to drive that forward through this Next 176 vehicle inside one of the most respected companies in South Africa. What are you seeing? What are you hoping for? Why are you dedicating time to this?
Yes. Again, I think financial services, but I dare say actually corporates, unique potentially on the African continent. So you started off asking me how did I end up in venture capital? I'm not sure that I am in venture capital, by the way. If you kind of follow the things that I've been doing, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. What we have tried to do is to kind of play in the space called venture capital, and we've tried to make sure that in Next 176 we understand the rules of that game, and we can play it by the rules. But actually, I think the biggest opportunity that's facing us is the opportunity of amazing businesses and entrepreneurs like yourselves. And the opportunity that you get anyway by, the resilience, the backing, the hunger that you have. The opportunity that could be matched by what incumbent corporates have.
Yes.
I think our unfair advantage is actually that. And the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity I personally see is the opportunity to make both of these malleable. Because I think when you combine these, the net result is absolutely amazing. We're not sitting in the US, where everyone else has been dreaming before kind of the VC, funding desert. Not everyone is thinking about IPOs and all of those things. There's a lot more that's that. And maybe IPOs are not the answer for us. But I think that there is a world where corporates, not only by deploying capital, I think corporates and startups there's an opportunity for these to kind of come together and figure out how to make both malleable. And I think if we're able to do that, we can make the life of Pumla better. We can make the life of the society and the community that Pumla comes in better. We can make the life and the society of South Africa better, and we can make this continent better.
Well, I completely share that vision and feel very, very privileged to be part of it in our own small way. I think we have the same hope, and we operate in our sector, which is HR tech, a little bit of fintech as well. And my hope is really that business can see itself as a very important part of society, not as separate from society or the improvement or the progress of our country, but as very much the driving force behind it. And whether that's contributing to education and skills gaps inside these businesses, whether that's employing more people and making sure that everybody benefits from the AI revolution, the tech revolution. I think that if business leaders took that approach in South Africa, that we would end up in a very good place. And I couldn't agree more that startups are a different animal in South Africa than they are in the United States. We're not all going to go from zero to Facebook. But there's so much opportunity in collaboration and in taking the attitude that businesses have a big role to play in society. I can't thank you enough for joining us today.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for this opportunity, Caroline.
I hope you'll join us again soon.
I'd love to be invited again. Okay. I hope I've made it through.
You passed with flying colors. Thank you, Vuyo.
Thank you, Caroline.